Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new movie, What If Naruto Fell in Love with Kaguya Part 1. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
This wasn't so difficult. Who said being Hokage was going to be easy? So far, life had been easy, and it could only get better. The aroma of coffee, an open window that let in a breeze from the village. He was unsure of the smell, but he knew it relaxed him. It was home. Even so, a cool breeze crept up his spine, making him shiver. Naruto had been at it for a while, so it could have been from staying in the same position for an extended period of time. There was nothing to be concerned about in his home or the Hokage's office. To make matters worse, he was the Hokage, a title that spoke volumes about his character. Despite all of the voices of reason, a spark of doubt spoke to him. There was no solid reason for his concern. He could blame it on the nightmare that plagued him the night before. He responded by concentrating on the document in front of him. Naruto's gaze scanned the printed words on the paper, which he had already read twice. He signed his name and placed the document in the hardwood desk's corner. It felt strange to be seated on this side. The other end was more familiar. Naruto rose from his seat to survey the village he had sworn to protect. Even as he finished his work, that feeling persisted and grew stronger. The terror snored and watched. He followed every shadow, crease, and crack he could see in the buildings. The very first hour, the door closed behind him. His heartbeat slowed, and he wanted to turn his gaze toward it, but he couldn't. He wasn't prepared, whatever it was. A voice called out his name. Another agonizing chill ran up his spine. Naruto recognized that voice from anywhere. It was still fresh in his mind, and he wasn't going to forget it anytime soon. Naruto looked into the eyes of a dead man. A person who died the night before. Hyuga Neji, someone who had given his life to save him from a situation in which he should never have been. What happened last night? That didn't make any sense. He was right in front of him, alive and well. This Neji caricature stood taller and barked out words. I'd like to report that the mission was a success, Lord Hokage. Naruto blanched as he remembered his voice. What were these thoughts? What was the situation? Is there something wrong, Lord Hokage? Naruto said, dismissed. Write a report, I have work to do. Simple words escaped his lips. He walked past the desk without looking at the dead. As he did so, words echoed in Naruto's mind. I aspire to be as great as this Hokage. These were not his thoughts. It should be impossible because it was Neji's. Did he even sound like that? He hurried forward and slammed the door behind him. A flash of red appeared as he collided with someone he hadn't noticed. The contents flew into the air and he easily caught them. Nothing ruined, in perfect condition. Happy birthday, Naruto, the words were spelled. Naruto froze, read, and then reread it. No, damn it, keep an eye on it. Oh. He recognized the cursed voice and recognized his mother's long, smooth red hair. It was impossible to speak because a lump had formed. Naruto, this was supposed to be a surprise, exclaimed Kushina Uzumaki. He noticed his father standing behind him, a sheepish smile on his face. You expected to surprise a Hokage, Kushina. Of course, he's still my son, says the father. The interaction jolted him out of his stupor, and Naruto returned the cake. Hold on, I have something important to do. Awa, really? Will you be back soon? He dashed through the corridors, surrounded by a golden light. What was the situation? His head hurt, making it difficult to think. Why did he want to inflict such pain on someone? This should not be happening. Naruto blew the hinges off the door, allowing him to exit. He watched it crash into the ground below. There was no one around. He took a deep breath, recalling the air of the village, but none of it felt new. He felt as if he were trapped in a room with no air to breathe. He turned to face the building's spire. He jumped to the roof quickly and took in the view of the village. Naruto looked behind him to see the busts of the previous Hokage. He was the sixth, but it felt strange. He scoured the village, which was exactly as he remembered it. Every street, every building. Except that it wasn't. No way, it couldn't be. He spent his entire life here, 20 years. He clenched his teeth and took deep, strained breaths. He was aware. The last, true memory came to him as everything fell into place. Every single thing felt off. Despite the jagged and conflicted memories that were not his, none of this was real. This was all an illusion, a fabrication made just for him. The bars he was holding onto snapped under the strain of his grip. As he gathered his chakra, the building shook. He went as far as he could with every source of power at his disposal. The village dispersed as the world's face broke. A brief period of darkness before everything gathered and reimagined as an ice world. The cold air pricked his lungs, and a touch drew his attention to those nearby. "Don't worry, we've got you," muttered Sasuke as he raced forward. Sakura, Kakashi, and Obito all followed closely behind. The winds howled as Naruto floated through the air. He shook his head and looked down at his hands. "Impossible," muttered a woman. The voice drew his attention, and he looked up to see the figure of Kaguya Utsutsuki. Pale skin, a third eye, horns, and a long white gown. They were up against a goddess with nearly limitless power. Sakura, Obito, and Kakashi moved against her. As Kaguya attacked them, they dodged and moved with precision. Susanoo, Obito's wife, had her in her grip. But even so, Sasuke teleported behind her, but Naruto remained motionless. "Finish her, Naruto." It was a forgery. "Stop it. Stop this nonsense." He was not present. This was not true. The world fell silent, and with the flip of a switch, it was all gone. Everyone had vanished. "Stop," a voice inquired. His limbs were paralyzed, and he couldn't move no matter how hard he tried. There was nothing but a white, empty world. Except for her, nothing existed. Kaguya moved in front of him, casting a sidelong glance. Her white, blank eyes narrowed. "Does that constitute a command?" "You've won, haven't you?" Naruto exclaimed. "Not quite," Kaguya said, turning away. Her smile, no matter how small, was always sinister. "Your allies are still fighting, but it will be a lifetime before they arrive. Why are you doing this? Why don't you just kill me and be done with it?" Such a question. Ages have passed and nothing has changed. He screamed and was finally able to move. He was no longer bound by the invisible shackles. Nothing else existed, nothing else mattered except for her. He dashed toward the goddess, intent on annihilating her and leaving only ash. He summoned his technique to his hand and surged as much power through it as he could. Nothing could describe his euphoria as he watched her fly away, trapped within the confines of his technique. There was a huge explosion, and he thought he died along with her. It was all gone in the blink of an eye. The scenery changed, and all he could see were mountains and snow. He noticed his breath was cold. This wasn't the cold, was it? Whatever happened here, whether he was maimed or blinded, would not translate into the real world. Did that give you a sense of accomplishment? He shivered as his blood ran cold. She knelt on the ground behind him, her dress and hair strewn on the cold white beneath, her dainty hand tracing the soft snow. She was unharmed, free, and unconcerned. Those eyes looked at him and spoke to him. He posed no threat. "Or will you go on?" "Let me out of here," Naruto said, his voice unnaturally calm. An excessive amount of energy had been expended. "Is it in your nature to fight for a meaningless cause and ask meaningless questions? What in the world do you expect from me? Why do humans cling to their lives? There is no value," he was told. "We don't see things the same way you do. Is that all? Fighting for nothing is interesting. Let me go, let me out of this charade. Return what was once yours, and you will no longer suffer," she said. Kaguya paid no attention to him. Snow fell from her grasps and was lost in the wind. Naruto recognized what she was referring to. Chakra was the source of his power, which everyone on the planet possessed. It was a vital essence. If it was taken, it meant death. "Never, you'll fail no matter what." Kaguya didn't say anything, instead sweeping her hand across the snow. "Will your reaction be the same in a millennium? Wasn't that impossible? Wasn't that the case? It doesn't matter if it's two, I'll never change my mind." For the first time, a frown crossed her features. "If that's the case, the only thing that awaits you at the end is death. He will always defy her, he will never surrender. And then I die. Then you must suffer." Naruto stared at the world's white blank sky. He thought of nothing and daydreamed about nothing. He was now alone. The cold had gone, and the mountain ranges had vanished. She is nothing more than a manifestation of her will. He lay on nothing, the world was empty. No, perhaps he was standing. When he looked behind him, all he saw was the white, blank slate of this world. A world full of empty space. It was the first day, and he was going insane. After all, nothing was real. Is this the best option? Kaguya had vanished in the blink of an eye, but Naruto knew that this was her domain, and she would always be on guard. His thoughts were almost certainly his own. He wasn't sure, though. What did she have in mind? How would she react? He reasoned that it didn't matter. He had no choice but to flee and endure. Naruto would have fled, but no amount of chakra he gathered to disrupt this illusion worked. That was all he could do, other than hope that his comrades could assist him. Is it really 1,000 years? He shook his head to clear his mind. He gathered chakra by placing his hands in a seal and expunging it. He tried again after the first failed attempt. and again until he couldn't go any further. The initial week, he walked across the plains. The grass swayed but there was no wind, unnatural, but the breeze blew and the world returned to normalcy. When a tinge of blue spread into the horizon and clouds formed and shifted in the air, the sky was empty and lifeless. He resumed his leisurely stroll, but it wasn't nearly enough. The ground beneath him expanded, and his steps became higher in order to find traction. When he looked up at the steep, it seemed to go on forever. He kept going, and after a while, his legs started to burn. Naruto came to a halt when he couldn't go any further. He sat there, watching the sunset behind the world. The moon appeared above him, and he stared at it until it vanished. The burn on his legs had never healed, no matter how long he waited. It was time to move as gold light broke through the clouds. He continued his ascent of the never-ending mountain. When he was hungry, he ate, and when he was thirsty, he drank. The pain in his legs never went away, no matter how much he rested. What was Kaguya up to? Why did she give him the power to shape the world on the spur of the moment? He couldn't grasp it. A goddess kept an eye on him, and it wasn't out of kindness. There was no supernatural protection. It was a pleasant and quiet company. The pain he felt wasn't real, but the way his tendons burned was exactly as he remembered. He became tired of the never-ending climb, and the mountain receded until it was flat. The ground shook, fell, and was devoured by golden sands. He could only see dunes, and the sand blew away at the tips. He was lost in the desert for days. He collapsed, his mouth parched and dry. Lips that were cracked and bleeding, he crawled through the coarse sand until he stumbled upon an oasis. He dipped his head in for a drink before falling inside and sinking to the bottom. Naruto took a breath and forgot about drowning. There was simply nothing to do. He didn't have to drink or eat anything. He ran away from his problem. He wished to be exhausted, and so he was. The heaviness in your limbs, your weakness, and how your breaths were always shallow and you couldn't get any more air. Water poured into his lungs, overpowering his exhaustion, and forcing him to the surface. The initial month. What the hell am I supposed to do? He exclaimed. There was no echoes. It's all a ruse. He exclaimed from the jungle's ravines. Was he supposed to go 1,000 years without seeing another human being? When was the last time he said anything? Hadn't it been almost a month? The heat and humidity of the jungle made his brow sweat. I've been wandering in this empty dream for so long. There's nothing for me here. Then make. He turned to face Kaguya, who was standing on ice, clear, clean, and abyssal. In fact, there was nothing but ice beneath their feet. What did you create? It was pointless to fight her, and nothing he could do would ever hurt her. Anything you want, she said, her palm flat against the sky. The stars twinkled above. Before colors flared to life, lights in the sky that shifted every moment of every color. He'd heard about it, but he'd never seen it. How come you gave me this ability? Yet another worthless one, she replied, her eyes narrowing. Are you already weakening? A day or a year means nothing to me, but it has only just begun. Stop talking. He made her vanish, but she reappeared to his right. If you don't like it, make your own ideal world. It'll never be, he said, closing his eyes, but they were wide shut. Do you believe I have true dominion here? Or is this your idea of perfection? Of course not. I have no reason to. It's all a ruse. They are absolutely nothing. We hold similar beliefs. Not at all. Naruto responded. Is there one? Kaguya shook her head. What kind of question is that? Kaguya, the cold goddess, was a fitting name for someone who lacked basic human comprehension. What happened to her? Or was she teasing him? He had no idea, but she had been like this when he had fought in the real world. Who are you? He inquired, but she had already left. The wood was black and rotten, and moss grew in the dark corners of the room. Grass grew inside, and plants in bloom where the sun reached them. A small reflection caught his eye, glass hidden under the cover of the fauna. He found a picture frame, but when he turned it over, there was nothing. He looked up, the decadent room becoming a familiar sight. A glance at the picture frame revealed a photo of Team 7, and he glared at Sasuke, while the other boy was not impressed. The other two, Kakashi and Sakura, were smiling. Naruto had forgotten about them. He had last spoken when Kaguya approached him. Only 2 encounters in nearly a month since he was brought here. Naruto climbed over a fallen wall to reach the roof above, where he saw everything outside. The overgrown village of the Hidden Leaf, where trees grew out of houses, moss and other fauna grew from the village, and streets, pools of water, and a stream had taken over the pedestrian walkway. A glance at the Hokage monument revealed the 5 previous Hokage, exactly as he remembered them. Nothing had reached or tarnished the image of the 5. He wouldn't wish this dream on his worst enemy, and no matter how many times he said it, nothing was real. A life of solitude was not possible. He was a month in and couldn't see how he could possibly last 1,000 years. Every day in his youth, those days he wishes he could forget, was spent trying to find some sort of comfort from the darkness of loneliness, no matter how small or juvenile his attempts were. Here he was, alone, surrounded by the ghosts of his village. The only certainty he could say with utter, absolute certainty was that Kaguya had her own will. She was real. Despite the illusory technique, her ideals, beliefs, were all hers to keep. He didn't want to create, he didn't want these powers, and the people he hadn't even created wouldn't have free will, they'd be nothing more than puppets. But what was the point of waiting a millennium? He was certain Kaguya had her palm to his stomach, her all-killing ash bone ready to kill him the moment he was freed. He could either surrender or die, there was no other option. No, never. He would choose death, he would not go quietly into the night, he had to survive the years he was trapped. And even if the moment he was freed was death, it would be an act of defiance. All he had to do was stay alive. The fiberglass rod was long. It dipped out, over the edge, and peered inside the endless blue. While the thread was braver, it pierced beneath the surface, deep inside the waters, and at the end of the thread, what was it called? Was a lure with bait attached to it. A fishing rod had 4 or 5 parts, and the reel brought it back in, the reel would reel in the thread. It couldn't have been thread, could it? It had to be something more akin to fishing names. Reel, rod, bait, lure, and thread. Thread felt wrong. He decided to concentrate on the tip of his fishing rod, watching it dip ever so slightly. It was tempting to see it bend, the sign of a catch, of course. A fish awaited at the end, the grand prize of all fishermen. I wonder what kind of fish is here. Is it even possible to find lobster or something similar in this area? I really want to try lobster because I've heard it's delicious. Sekiro once told me that she and Ino went to this fancy restaurant and got to try lobster and some other fancy dish that I can't remember. I remember her saying it was so good that I had to try it. I never asked how it tasted, and I never went to that restaurant. What was the name of it again? I went there once and remember it being pricey. As a result, I never got to try it. Something cracked in his grip, and he took a deep breath of the cool, humid air, which loosened his grip but left his finger rigid. He reasoned that he was hungry. The rod pulled downward so hard that he thought it would break, and he felt twitches in his hand from the rod. His stomach yelled, his mouth watered, but his brain was disappointed. The line came to a halt, and the rod snapped back straight and frozen. Do lobster bite after bait and lures? Is it even capable of biting something like that? Along these lines, he remembered fishermen also used nets. There was no goddamn net on this boat. How was he going to get a net? The ocean was deep. He had no idea how far it went. Something in his hand cracked and shattered, and it landed on the boat's wooden floor. Damn it, he yelled. He reeled in the line, and the lure swayed in the breeze. He stared long, a desire to see it burn to ash in his hands welling up inside him. Of course, that didn't happen. Such a thing wasn't possible. Screw fishing. He heaved the fishing rod, spun around, and flung it off the boat and into the distance, feeling a sense of accomplishment as the rod floated before sinking into the ocean. This was far too difficult, especially since he couldn't follow the rules. He watched the sun as it dipped into the sea, nearing the end of its day. A menacing rumble behind him in the seemingly endless ocean, because he hadn't considered land, bloated, angry clouds, a corruption that spread. That doesn't look good, he paused. Well, that's obvious, he continued. The sail and wood lurched forward, swaying in the direction of the fast winds. The boat leaned to the right, water spilled in and stained the wood. Naruto focused his attention on the steering wheel, wondering how these things turned and what they were called. A rudder. Rudders beneath the boat allowed them to turn without moving the sails, allowing for precise maneuvering. When he turned the wheel, the boat righted itself and surged forward. It was so much easier in the real world. They were just there. He didn't have to think about it. Just live and breathe and do. Simple, easy. He didn't notice the passage of time. All he could think about was the agonizing pangs in his empty stomach, right up until the storm arrived. The clouds above had overtaken the calm blue, now convulsing with thunder and light. Rain fell from the sides, pelting him with large drops, and the waves became rough, crashing and heaving. The boat, a slave to the ocean, bent to the will of the storm. Rain flew in from the sideways, crashing against everything as water spilled onto the deck and washed away. From the brief time he spent on boats, it was always wet. The decks were wet. The inside was soaked. His clothing was drenched. Anything and everything. In fact, he was sick of the waters by this point, but that didn't mean it would stop. The ocean's icy touch was never ending, and the waves had become mountainous, shifting, and endless. He held onto the railing for support. His ship went sideways, but righted itself before drowning, and he rode at the apex of the waves before dropping back into the water, just like a ship should. Even though his limbs shook, goosebumps covered his skin, and his fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that it felt like it might break. His heart remained constant, calm, and collected, until he encountered something unexpected. No, this wasn't in any rules. His heart flickered for the first time in such a long time that he couldn't remember. The shadow of the wave drowned out the light and warped, like a hand wrapping around his ship. The water rushed up like a wall, piercing his ship's veil, ripping it apart, and anything untied or loose was thrown overboard. He knew a little about the ocean. It was cold, salty, and alive. Fuck the ocean. It was cold. His fingertips tingled uncomfortably, and he still felt his weight, planted on the wooden deck beneath his feet. The sails of his boat flowed like wind pushed it. This was not how things worked. It wasn't even close to how they were supposed to work. Hey, damn it, work, don't break the rules. We're supposed to sink, you see. Ships are not designed to swim. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be really dark, and I'm not supposed to know which way is up or down. He approached the edge of his ship and looked down below. There was hum, and his heart stopped beating. When are you going to stop playing? Her voice was melting, almost sinister, droll. But he couldn't have imagined how lovely the sound of another voice felt with that melodious, enthralling tone. Naruto swallowed a large lump and turned to face the source of the voice, Kaguya. Her hand tracing the rails, her hair trailing behind her, tendrils flowing above from the weightlessness of water. What? Are you sick of waiting? Naruto replied, almost unsure how to speak, how this verbal dance was supposed to go with another person. Strange. No, I have nothing of the sort, Kaguya said, not looking at him, instead staring idly at the items scattered around his ship. Then, he paused. Why don't you just do it? You recently asked the same question. How long ago was it? It's only been a couple weeks, but it's been almost a year, he sputtered. She gave him a quick glance, her white eyes settling on him before turning and looking up into the surface. Naruto felt all of his fight leave him, as did the bitter taste of her presence, and he couldn't bear to stand any longer, so he sat and leaned against the railings. There was something about the silkiness of her voice that captivated him, how she spoke to him, how it sounded, almost emotionless, yet full of raw life. He hadn't heard another voice in a long time. He cried no tears because she couldn't see it in the ocean. He despised the passage of time and wished he hadn't kept track of it. But he needed to know how much longer he had to hold on. Will it all be over one day? He didn't want it to sound like a question. It will, but you know how this will end. He couldn't recall the specifics of their last conversation, but he yearned to hear more, to remind himself that he wasn't alone in this world. I would never do this to another person. It's too cruel, she says. This is mercy, he says. This is torment. Is it? Kaguya tilted her head to the side, her white eyes puzzled. Was she human? Could it ever be forgotten? She smiled. He didn't want to respond, and something curled in his stomach as she continued to speak. However, you have the ability to make the journey easier. Why do you cause yourself so much trouble? It's hardly less than what the rest of the world is going through. He had closed his eyes, listening to every word she said, how she would pronounce her words, slow and methodical, as if she was speaking directly into his ear. Whatever brings you joy can last, but not forever, not in here. Now we're just repeating ourselves. He opened his eyes, and she was gone, leaving only him and the ship beneath his feet. The dominion he held had returned to him, and the ship sank, as did his heart. All he saw was darkness, and he didn't know which way was up or which way was down. All he could think about were her words. There was truth in them. He couldn't do it any longer, being alone in this world. When would she return? It had been 330 days since he had spoken to her, according to Kaguya, but it had felt like an eternity to him. It was time to stop being so stubborn, even if it was just a figment of his imagination. He couldn't go on without seeing another person. It hurt too much. It reminded him of bygone days he didn't want to return to. Why was she forced to leave? He once attempted to get drunk. He was 20 in this world, so he kept his promise. He never drank alcohol, despite the one time he accidentally drank a sip. He'd never gotten drunk with that logic in hand. Dream Drink could not replicate it. As a result, it was a pointless endeavor. On another occasion, he reimagined childhood memories. What if scenarios abound, such as what if his parents had raised him? He was a bystander rather than a participant. He stood there like a silent, invisible god. He realized halfway through that this person was not him. It was also difficult to imagine after a while. He frequently revealed himself by consuming copious amounts of ramen. He made and ate every type of ramen dish he could think of. It was all simple pleasures in life. His imagination was the only limit. Throughout it all, he felt constrained. He was constrained by the world he knew because he didn't know how something tasted or looked. Whether he knew a person's parents or other members of their family, he decided to take another route. Naruto kept his breath held. Each movement was precise and controlled, whether guided by instinct or done on purpose. A single blunder or poor decision would result in death. Never before had the stakes been higher. It was all swerves or blocked strokes, a kick that was cleared or a punch that was parried. A punch to the face, disoriented, and another in the ribs broke the stalemate. The victim retaliated by headbutting. The crack was satisfying when it landed. He keeled back, a hand clutching his nose, stunned and bleeding. He didn't notice the kick and was thrown into the brush. It was a splice in a perfect string that only existed to break the monotony. The round's temporary victor shook his head, wiping away the daze, and charged in after his attacker. He followed unnoticed. It would be simple to turn the tide, but he couldn't meddle in things that were already set in motion. Goosebumps and a shiver of delight crawled across his skin. This was exactly how he had imagined it. The way both of these people appeared, the landscape, and their skill. The fight went on, and exhaustion set in between the two fighters. The spring in their steps became heavier, and their strikes became sloppy and slow. The protagonist jumped away, shuriken flying from his grasp. The majority went wide, while the rest deflected and dodged. Both sides brandished kunai as they collided. Each strike meant to kill, aimed for vitals. Metal singing as it scraped and collided, until the blonde was disarmed, and the kunai vanished into the forests. As a knife plunged into his jacket, he was too slow to stop it. When a smoke bomb exploded, the injured person flew into the trees. With strained and quiet gasps, he knelt against the trunk. "You're still around here, aren't you? Just give up?" a hunter yelled. Naruto's hand reached into the jacket and pulled out the kunai. The blade's tip was blood-splattered. "Come on out. Honestly, why do you even try?" yelled the person. "It's pointless, it's hopeless, just give up." "How about you give up trying to get me to give up?" Everything froze, leaving the two characters motionless and lifeless. Naruto furrowed his brows, flicking his tooth with his thumb. Before the character jumped into the trees, the scene was reversed. It continued once more, and the two interacted with one another before he restarted it. They each said or did something different. "That can't be right," mumbled he. A sigh and a frown. The day grew darker, but he persisted in his efforts to repair it. The hours ticked by. He gave up and sat with his back to a tree trunk. Naruto observed the character after whom he was named in another scene, and another. Almost all of them had the same vexing problem. It didn't feel right. Naruto persisted until the battle was over. "I forgot," he said quietly. "I thought it was impossible," she says. It seemed like a lifetime ago. The specifics had faded from his memory. He felt as if he tainted the memory by failing to visualize the scene precisely. He couldn't honor it properly because he didn't have the material. He would never forget the message inside, no matter how terrible the realization was. He figured that's where it was important. He needed to change his plans. The shrill whines jolted him awake, like a choir singing in unison. This was repeated by dozens of rats in the sky. He was going insane. They were completely out of sync. Then he heard the waves sweeping calmly along the shore. When he opened his eyes, he saw a seagull. It tried to approach casually, sidestepping and prodding along the ground in an attempt to be stealthy. Naruto stood up. It was terrified by the sudden movement. The seagull screamed at him and took off. There were a lot of them in the sky, along the beach, on the beach, and on floating pieces of wood. Other than the debris from the hull, there was no trace of his ship. His cracked lips and dry throat irritated him the most. His head pounded, and sand clung to his hair. He stood up groggily. Of course, a shipwreck in a strange land somewhere unknown. He stood there watching the foam from the ocean wash up on the beach. The salt water looked tempting, but he knew the sea wouldn't irritate his throat. She simply felt compelled to sink the ship. That was a bad thing to do. It was extremely impolite. He had lost everything, he thought. As he shook his coat free of the sand, coins clinked together. He had little else on his back besides the salt-crusted clothes. He walked along the beach because he had nothing else to do. He came across a large bay shaped like a crescent moon while exploring a natural quarry. He watched the salt water recede from the bay until it was nothing more than a pool of water in the middle as the tide went down. He moved forward, keeping his gaze fixed on the ocean. It took him several hours to find any semblance of civilization. Into an alcove, away from the restless ocean. A dock was in place, with a boat tied to it. Naruto took a well-worn path worn smooth by years of travel. A small house sat in a clearing deeper above a hill. He could hear the beating chop of wood being splintered as it clunked together as it was sorted. The smell of fish was strong, and freshly caught fish were stacked in rows on a nearby table. Naruto approached the sound and discovered the source of the noise. A tall, elderly man was sawing through wood. A grunt was heard as the weighty axe rested on the stranger's shoulder. Dark, wary eyes landed on him. He was quiet for a while as he was assessed. "I don't get many visitors," he grumbled. "I washed up on the beach," Naruto explained. His tone was harsh. It was strange to talk to someone else. The man scratched his beard with a calloused hand from all the fishing and manual labor he had done. "Are you alone?" he inquired, wary but concerned. "I was the only one on board. There was no one else. I guess you're glad to be alive." Naruto chose not to respond. The man buried his axe in a large stump. "Come on, you look rough. The least I can do is help a needy man." He wiped his hands. Instead of speaking, he nodded. He was led to the cabin's porch but not inside. Instead, he was told to wait while the old man obtained whatever he required from within. There were a few hints about the man's life. A boar trophy hung above the door, and an animal hide was spread out to dry on some contraption in the corner. This was a man from the wilderness, who subsisted on the wilderness and possibly reveled in it. He came back with a plate of food and a pitcher of water. The man set the items on a table and said he was ready to eat. He left once more. The aroma of spiced fish and potatoes assaulted his senses, reminding him that he was hungry and thirsty. Naruto dug into the food with gusto, but he kept an eye on the pitcher. Although there was no cup, the man returned with 2 glasses and filled them. The man handed him a glass, which he took cautiously. "Would you mind telling me about your troubles that brought you here?" Naruto realized it wasn't water at all, but wine. The strong aroma of something fruity filled his nostrils. He took a sip, and the strange taste of alcohol reminded him of his master slipping him a flask of wine instead of water. It had the flavor of rotten fruit. He was thirsty enough that it didn't bother him too much, and he took a generous helping. "There's not much to say. I was alone at sea when a storm caught me off guard, as well as a specific person." "Are you unfamiliar with the sea?" he inquired. As he ate and drank more, Naruto shook his head. "What were you doing out there?" "I wanted to travel the world," she says. "Then you should go back where you came from, because this isn't a beautiful place." "There's nothing for me," he shrugged, "so I might as well find something." Naruto had already finished his food because there wasn't much to eat, so he was left with the wine. "What are you going to do now?" he inquired. "Where is the nearest town? Travel. There's a road down that path. Turn left and you'll be there in a couple of hours." Naruto replied, "Thank you. Would you be able to give me a pack and some supplies if I gave you some of these coins?" "What do you want?" "Just a blanket, some food, and a flask of water." In this dream, he had a pocket full of coins that could be as deep as he wanted. He didn't, however. Instead, he counted the money and double-checked that it was all he had. Silver and gold pieces. The man grabbed a few and went inside. Naruto took a sip of his drink and waited. It didn't take long for the man to return with the items. "Thank you so much," he said. The man nodded and poured himself another glass of wine. "Are you leaving right now?" "I have something important to do." The man nodded, his words sparse. It was all for the better. When Naruto started walking toward town, he realized he had forgotten to give the man a name. He would improve. He had all the time in the world, despite the fact that it wasn't his. He couldn't sleep at times. He would frequently look up at something above him, whether it was the starry sky, the canopy of trees, or anything else. His mind would wander freely during these times. Despite his efforts to concentrate on this or that action or goal, he could only see darkness and nothing else, no matter which way he looked. There was nothing to see, and it felt as if it was invading his senses. In the silence, his ears rang. This was an outlier. There were times when he imagined her reappearing, when the world bent to her will and changed and twisted in some way. All of his laws were declared null and void. He wondered if that was how she saw the real world. They conformed and complied rather than breaking the rules. That's how she expected things to go. He wasn't sure because it was just his own thoughts. Even in this fictitious world, he needed things to be as close to reality as possible, where he still stared at the woman holding him by the neck. The thought of her appearance made his heart race. The pervasive darkness was out of place, but that went away because his mind was free. He was expecting her to appear, and he sensed her presence. He didn't want her to be here. It would be so simple for her to disregard, to break the mold and reveal herself. However, his vision or all light returned to the earth. He wasn't sure which one it was, if she had tampered with his perceptions or if he had deluded himself. In the simple blanket, he tossed and turned. The moon shone brightly in the darkness. The silver rays cut through the trees. Time was of the essence. One thing he couldn't control was whether the sun rose or set. He was always suspicious that she was manipulating his sense of time. He wouldn't be surprised if she said somewhere near the end that he wasn't halfway there yet. It was expected, and he wasn't sure he'd survive if she lied to him. He wasn't sure how often he thought this, if it was the 1st or 100th time. Naruto took a step forward and decided to start a fire for himself. He'd be unable to sleep tonight. He stared into the crackling and snapping red tendrils. Fire was significant because it drove away the creatures of the night as well as the darkness itself. There was enough firewood to last until morning. He yawned and ate dry bread, which was difficult to swallow without some liquid to wash it down. Naruto leaned back and gazed at the stars for quite some time. He was the first to hear the steps, the crunching of dirt beneath his visitor's feet. It wasn't even a person. No, this visitor was a large and beastly wolf. "Good day," he said. The beast, of course, did not respond. It looked at me with intelligent eyes. He moved slowly as he searched for a pouch and extracted a piece of salted jerky. He extended it to the wolf and waited. It approached him, its mouth inching toward his hand, and grabbed the piece of meat. It ate loudly and haphazardly. "You know I have more in this pouch, right?" He smiled. "Maybe I'll give you more if you stick around." He first assumed it was the early morning fog crawling through the brush and trees. He was quick to correct that thought once he breathed it in. His lungs were poisoned by the smoke tinges. He pressed on while wiping his mouth with a cloth. It was no surprise that the air smelled strange. The smoke grew darker as he walked further down the littered path. He crinkled his nose as a foul odor hit him. The harsh smoke made his eyes water, but he didn't want to turn away. It kept a ghastly pace, unbroken and undirected by wind, aside from the smoke that flowed around his movements. When he couldn't take it any longer, he was forced to blow it away with a gust of wind. He looked behind him and saw no sign of the wolf. It had vanished after a couple more treats the night before. He considered himself a beggar. The foliage dispersed, forming a wide valley. Gray clouds hung in the sky, and the wind blew wild twirls of smoke. He noticed the ruins of a village in the valley below. There was a small castle nearby, as well as other smaller wooden structures. Many were demolished in heaps and engulfed in smoke. "There isn't a soul in sight." He descended a winding, worn path. Ash yelled, clinging to the grass in his own clothes. He got to the bottom and moved in close. There was an entrance with a splintered gate littered with arrows. Bodies covered in mud and blood littered the ground on the other side of the gate. A crow looked at him, its wings fluttering nervously. He wandered through the village's ruins. There were no fires to speak of, only charred foundations and glowing embers. The simple paths led him to the small castle, which had a moat built around it and a raised castle bridge. "Wanderer," exclaimed someone from the castle. They didn't notice them until they peered between two columns. Others appeared along the wall, their weapons drawn. What is it that draws a stranger to a raided village? He was armored in the same way as the first two Hokage, or samurai in the Land of Iron. "A hunter by the sea assisted me and directed me here." Was he one of the hunters? What was his name? He smirked. "We didn't share our names," he said, explaining why he didn't have that information. Someone above yelled, "Convenient." However, the leader said, "You didn't steal from the dead or the houses. I'll believe you. If you're lying, I'll hunt you down myself." Sure. However, I must ask you to leave because we are unable to accept anyone." He nodded, despite his disappointment. "Be careful on the roads. It is not safe to travel at this time." Nonetheless, he was turned away. He didn't bother looking back because it was an easy way out. He stood for a while outside the gate. He didn't have many supplies because he planned to refill them here. He'd have to wait until the next town, which he had no idea where or when it would be. So he did what he could only do. He walked the only well-traveled road. He only came to a halt when he noticed the stranger on the road. He initially thought they were carrying a staff, but the blade at the end dispelled that notion. He realized it was a woman as he got closer. She was wearing light leather armor. She regarded him with suspicion. "So, what's a lone stranger walking around unarmed in this time? Why is there an armed person in my way?" He wondered. "It's my cane," she explained. "I suppose I can hit people with it as well." Her hair was white but short, not reaching her shoulders. Her blue eyes stood out against her pale features. "I suppose it doesn't matter because you don't have them," she added. "And I'm not the only one." When he looked behind him, he saw that it was the wolf from the previous night. Other than passing by to sit behind the woman, it paid little attention to him. Not of their odor, it declared. Similar to a stupid friendly meat bag, but stranger. "I didn't know you could talk." He blinked. "He likes you," said the woman. "It offended me." "He didn't eat you, did he?" She shot back. "That means something." "That's right, it means I'm not dead." He could hear a light drizzle. He looked up and saw droplets falling from the dark clouds. It was a light rain, but it could turn heavier. "I have a camp nearby. Come or don't," she said as she turned away from the road. Just like that. "You weren't exactly friendly earlier." "I trust Ugrin's word enough," she said as she walked into the bushes. Ugrin, the wolf, trailed close behind without looking back. It was a formal invitation. It wasn't something he could deny. As a result, he followed them. It was a brief but crowded stroll through the bushes. Other than what they left behind, there didn't appear to be any clear trail. The aroma of cooking food was a welcome change from the smoke. They arrived in a particularly flat area, covered by rain above, with a cooking pot hung over a warm fire and a cloth draped over a makeshift cover made of branches in the corner. "My name is Altusy." Yeah, foreign name, get over it," the woman said as she placed her weapon near a bag. "Naruto," he said. "Warm and dry, useful," the wolf said. It lay down on a bed of pine needles and closed its eyes. The woman sat on a large rock and stirred the pot with a spoon. "Do you realize you're following in the footsteps of an army? I figured it out from the road." "So why?" Altusy asked. "It's not really safe." She appeared to be satisfied with her meal and pulled out a bowl. "I'm completely lost," he admitted. "I have no idea where I am or what this country is called." "People don't just appear out of nowhere," she replied. The bowl and spoon were handed to him. He thanked her and bit into the soup. It was overly salty, but it was hot food. Then he explained how he ended up here. "Huh," she remarked. "That should do it." Naruto remembered that there was only one road he could take. "When you said I didn't have them, what did you mean?" She remained silent for a while, staring at drips from a nearby branch. She finished her meal and began to remove her leather armor. "These dark blades, obsidian order, they attacked the village the other day." "Oh, why?" "War, obviously," she snorted. "And you really don't know this place, do you?" He shook his head. "It's all the same thing really. This one hates that one, this one wants that thing, this one has been slighted, so they fight." "Oh," he said. She appeared to be very hazy. "Look, I barely know this place better than you do. Do you think I'm going to remember the names of all these places? Right? But you seem to be familiar with this order. They took something from me. I want it back." Altusy shrugged. "Now clean that bowl, would you?" He obeyed her request and returned it. She crawled under her makeshift shelter and leaned against the large gray wolf. "Why did you assist me? Everyone here despises outsiders. I haven't talked to anyone in ages," she said as she patted the wolf like a lap dog. "Just because he can talk doesn't mean he wants to. You couldn't have been too bad if he hadn't ripped you apart," says the narrator. "I'm so relieved," he frowned. "You didn't seem so worried when we met on the road. What can you do?" She chuckled. He replied, "I'm a ninja. I can do a lot without a weapon, and I actually prefer it." She made a hum. "A ninja? Huh. I heard about them. There aren't many left around here. Is that correct?" Naruto asked. He looked out into the bushes as the sky darkened by the minute. "The nearest town is a couple days away on this road, so we'll be going the same way if the order goes there. Might as well, I'd say." Altusy yawned, wrapping her cloak around her. He got the gist of it. "Might as well," he said. They were trapped in time. Blood-sheathed blades and beasts, the hills are filled with howls and wails. The land was splattered with blood and covered in bodies. There was no town in sight, given that it was supposed to be another day before they arrived. Altusy fixed her gaze on the battleground, while Ugrin sniffed the air. "No use, I can't make anything out. How about you?" Altusy asked. Naruto shrugged as he looked at her. "I was just wondering if, being a ninja and all, you had good vision." He couldn't see their blades, let alone their faces, down below. They had no banners either, as they belonged to one of the armies. "We need to take a closer look and find them." "Down there?" he asked, perplexed. "It's not like we're going to join," she said. He couldn't object because she had already gone off. Ugrin growled for no apparent reason. "A pleasant odor, there will be no hunger tonight." "That's messed up," he thought to himself as he bounded after the woman. He exhaled a sigh. There would undoubtedly be many stragglers who broke away from the main army. They'd be safer if they stayed together. He could feel it when he took a step. This illusion was shattered. Everything went backwards. Fallen soldiers rose to their feet, their wounds healed, the fires died, and the battlefield was left untouched, until there were two armies facing each other on a large field. They then charged at each other once more. Maybe he could use some help with this, but he didn't have anyone to see if it was adequate. His late mentor was a writer, and he could have been of great assistance. He had no choice but to wait for her. "Do you yearn for things like this?" There was a shiver. He crossed his arms and gazed down. "No." "Then why?" she inquired, her voice full of curiosity. He remained silent, but she was still present. The armies clashed yet again. "I've had plenty of time to think," he explained. "This happens, and even if I ever have the opportunity to stop the fighting, it may happen again. This was endless when I first arrived. It was a bother, so I put an end to it," Kaguya hummed. He was aware of the story. She ate a fruit from the god tree, and all fighting ceased. They all referred to her as the rabbit goddess. He was amused when he felt air blow out of his nose. "You make it sound so simple." Naruto didn't mean to look away. Even standing there, she felt otherworldly, which didn't seem so far-fetched. "It was," Kaguya confirmed. "None of you had the power you have now. They resisted, of course, but not like you." "I'd like to think so." He forced himself to turn away. You can make anything true, so why do you choose this? Naruto turned to face Kaguya, her gaze narrowed at the devastation below. It's either lose or lose. It would come to an end one way or another. Maybe lose a little less. It's either dust or death. They couldn't seal Kaguya if he fell. However, perhaps. How about you? Do you observe my every move? Does time pass as quickly for you as it does for me, 1 minute at a time, or does it feel faster? Answer, she instructed. The warriors below were as slow as water. The blood spurted through the air, almost stopping. This happens, and it's true for us, he said. I dunno, maybe it's just a part of us, but there's still good despite it all, love I guess. He cast a glance, but she remained motionless. Her expressions were always the same. He was curious if she was always like this. However, when he reflected on his time here, he didn't feel quite as complete. How strange, she replied. She then walked away. What made her act that way? Where is your true realm, of which you spoke so highly? It occurred to him that this was the first time he had seen a woman in his room. The other was that she had never returned so soon after leaving. Another thing was that he was pleased with it. She moved around the room, staring at various pieces of furniture. Her long locks and gown dragged across the floor. How did it get to be so long? The paper was forgotten as he angled his chair toward her. I thought you'd prefer it, she continued. Even if I do, I can't do it all the time. It's strange, isn't it? It's not real, it's just my imagination. And that takes a lot of effort. I just use this place to map it out, and I've been really distracted by my thoughts. She listened the entire time he spoke. Kaguya had been looking out the window at passing pedestrians. Do these places I created feel as real as the real world because they aren't yours? Not much of a difference. He had a feeling it wasn't. Right now, I think yours and the real one would be just as good. So you give in. I don't blame you for that one, he admitted. She narrowed her eyes, but not in the way that indicated she was annoyed that her fatal strike had not killed him. She titled her head almost imperceptibly. The key word is right now, which does not include the regret I'd feel later. She returned her gaze to the window. He hadn't returned to the previous world because he was preoccupied. You know, it's crazy how 100 years have passed. I had time to think about many things. I can say that I'm prepared to fail. It took me a long time to accept it. She remained silent. I guess what I'm saying is, Kaguya, are you willing to fail? When her features contorted into rage, Naruto couldn't help but smile. Anger was a simple emotion to which no goddess was immune. He couldn't stop himself from pushing away from this apathy. It was like a whisper in the back of your head. You didn't even realize it wasn't your voice. But it didn't matter. Kurama did that to me, encouraging my rage and pain. It felt good. I could do so many things. Naruto closed his eyes and remembered all the times he took power. Did the 10 tails also do that to you? He looked into her white eyes, taking in every detail and waiting for any emotion to show. Her brow furrowed, and a flare rose within them, sending his heart racing. She walked away. As he climbed down the rocky cliffs, his limbs couldn't stop shaking. He shivered, and the chill ran down his spine. He couldn't grip anything on the wet rocks because his palms were clammy. Even though he couldn't see them, he could hear the sounds and drums of war. He was looking forward to her next visit. He then realized he didn't have to grip anything. He jumped off the small cliff and neared the forest's entrance. Altusy muttered, "There you are." He was pulled from his thoughts. "I suspected you were a coward." She stood beside her companion, its wolf eyes watching her. "No," he said. "In fact, I'm kind of looking forward to this," he said, out of breath. "Good, because I was wondering what I should do if I came across a ninja, and if it's anything like back home, ninja are trump cards." She smiled. Altusy nodded to Ugrin, who bolted. With him in tow, she followed the wolf. "What do you mean?" he inquired. A pace was established that was neither running nor walking. They crept through a wild game trail, staying close to a steep rocky hill. There aren't many of you left, and you're in high demand because you changed the battlefield. You can imagine the tactics, right? I haven't really thought of a war without shinobi. The fighting didn't seem to get any louder despite the fact that they'd gotten closer, perhaps because of the hill. How did you find out about this? I was a captain once, she mused. It was all she said, but she wished it had something to do with the Obsidian Order. If she was willing to travel through a war zone to reach them, he wondered what it could be. He nearly tripped, and the others looked back in concern. His limbs felt shackled and weighed down. He fought back, attempting to free them. They became heavier by the second, and he collapsed to his knees. The world came to a halt, and he searched for her. He kept his gaze fixed on her, her hand under his chin, her long, sharp nails digging into his cheeks. I had my own will. Are you sure? You did leave. For a moment, you doubted yourself, he smiled, but not mockingly. Will it be to the bitter end, so defiant? She snarled. He couldn't help but laugh. Everything he felt, how heavy his heart beat. His fingertips could have been flayed. Her breaths, which trailed down his throat, sent goosebumps up and down his spine. Those white eyes were red hot with rage. So, you do, after all, feel some emotion. Her hand tightened, making him uncomfortable. I'm not sure if I even imagined this or not, but someone said I could piss off anyone. Go on, make me right. You think you're clever, Kaguya said. All the answers and solutions have come to you. She squeezed one last time, lifted him, and threw him away. The world went dark. He couldn't even see his nose or anything in front of him. You could have killed me long ago, but this is the last chance for my chakra. How would you even accomplish that? You expect me to do your bidding, to lay still and let you have me. Her voice was everywhere, but he couldn't see her. Subjugate, Wabunther repeat, and you follow my commands. His felt it, something instinctive in the corner of his mind. It sounded ridiculous, however, dare as he might try to say it, he shouldn't. You never brought this up, never said it for a chance for me to say it. Kaguya appeared then, like an angel in the darkness, one with knowledge of it. That instinctive feeling was fear, or perhaps a sense of a danger. He kind of forgot about what he could do back in the real world. He understood all chakra. I'll never say it. We shall see. You will either die or give in. You forgot a third choice. I get out, he replied. Yeah, it's a tiny chance, but I'm kind of liking those odds. She narrowed her eyes in this darkness, where it was only her in view. She scoffed, another millennium. He gritted his teeth. It's been 200 years, she added more. Somehow, he didn't quite mind it. This woman, who made his heart flutter and filled it with dread at the same time. The fire in his heart cooled down. You know, I noticed something. After all this time, you never once tortured me. Why is that? Why should I? He wondered if he was dreaming, but was that disgust? Did she detest violence? He recalled the time he had been stabbed with her all-killing ash bone. He had remembered the pure panic, but it was relatively painless. If she felt rage and disgust, could there be others? You're willing to wait that long? That was crazy. I will, she replied. Yet, I have learned as well. The world began to brighten, and he fell to his knees again. His limbs were locked, like earlier. He looked directly into her eyes, but he didn't know what she was possibly planning. His surroundings started to change, flashing one place to the next. No one is without fear, she said. All he could ask himself is what did she fear? Around him, it turned from one memory to the next. People and locations that he knew, those real, and things he created inside. What are you doing? He was shaking so badly, it hurt. His heart trembled, but he felt the excitement in his bones. This was something out of his control, that he didn't have to manually pivot and manipulate. The world appeared to be like home. A familiar moon hung in the sky. Around him, he recognized everyone he knew in the real world. They almost felt tangible. If he spoke to them, would they reply? It would be almost as good as the real thing. Those trapped in a dream of everything they all wished to come true. No longer, bathed in silver moonlight, she swept her hand and they turned to dust. Everything, the world, the moon, even her. It came to him then. She was his terrible love. There was no sun and no moon. He had no idea how many years had passed. For all he knew, it could have been days. There was only him in the void. She also did not appear. What could one do in such a place? He could only wait and think. Be alone for the rest of your life. Naruto reflected on the story he had started but never finished. He had given it much thought, even before Kaguya relinquished the power she bestowed in this dream world. For the time being, his thoughts didn't seem to mesh well with his imagination. Writing it down seemed to work best, as it allowed my imagination to be more fluid and directed. Then he acted it out, visualizing it. All he could think about now was summaries. The landscape and people were shaky, each voice uncertain and repeating itself, and emotion was lacking. He wouldn't mind writing it down if he could get out of here. It was going to be a story about vengeance, avoiding war, and all the nonsense politics of sending people to die. A personal note. If he had to put it in the summary, it sounded so lame. What should he do? Naruto had many thoughts about Kaguya, what he knew about her and what he can learn about her. Everything she said came back to him. What should he do? He screamed his guts out, screaming into the abyss, but no sound echoed throughout the world. Everything he threw at it was consumed, drowned, or erased. What did she discover? Loneliness was something he never wanted to experience again. He couldn't do anything but stir his thoughts. She was always watching and listening. Tell me, Kaguya, you're someone, you must be afraid of something in the world. He inquired. He repeated it because there was no response, over and over again. He might as well irritate her until she couldn't take it any longer. He said quite a few things. He could have yelled for days or years. Tell me, Kaguya, with absolute certainty, can you tell me that the 10 tails turned you into a husk, doing nothing more than following its bidding? A hand was wrapped around his neck, choking him. I am no such thing. How petulant you are, furious eyes bore into him. I don't even know what the word means, he laughed, hit a nerve. I told you I was good at pissing people off. There was something odd about all of this. He was experiencing vertigo and couldn't figure out why. New images appeared. It took some time to adjust to the possibility of up and down existing again. He couldn't place the surrounding mountains and forests. In the distance, there was the god tree, the sun behind its face, casting a great silhouette across the land. Then there was smoke, which clouded the horizon. A great haze covered the world as far as he could see. It was a land of ash and soot. The world had gone dark. The warmth of the sun on his cheeks, the cool breeze that brushed against his fingers, the clouds that swept over him soaked his clothes. She crafted detail that he couldn't manage, or it felt so new to him that he couldn't tell the difference. Plumes of smoke littered the land, rising into the air and blending in with the clouds divided by. The ruins of a long ago battle can be found below. He could smell and even taste death and decay. It made him nervous. All that war, never ending, and what if now? A goddess, aren't you? You get to choose who dies, which is everyone. How did you ever come to that decision? One day, you crawled out of bed and decided, welp, I'm going to fucking kill everything. God. Quiet. His mouth had vanished, and he had made no sound. What the fuck is this? Perhaps he could learn sign language. If only he could communicate in sign language. Thank you for bringing his mouth back to life. Do it again, and I'll win. How so? I get the moral victory, of course. You're afraid of what I'm going to say. Fear you? Her eyes lit up with delight and she laughed. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. He'd appreciate hearing more. Yeah, he said, smiling. Look at you, laughing. Too bad it was completely creepy, and I was not attempting to be funny. I have no reason to be afraid of you. Anything you say is meaningless. But there she was, talking and listening. You said so yourself, and just like how we're filled with hate, there is no one without fear. Kaguya, you can't be your own person if you don't fear anything. He said, you can't be your own person if you don't fear anything. Once again, you proved your mettle. She didn't respond. He wanted to say it was because of you. He kept his mouth shut because it was the strangest thing he had ever thought. What a pity. It was once his friends who kept him going, to complete a task that had been bequeathed to him. What fueled him now was when she came to visit, all in the name of survival. For the time being, his greatest strength was Kaguya, and if she found out, she would abandon him. Death was preferable to loneliness. Yeah, he said, smiling. There was another reason as well. I'm guessing this is how the 10 tails got to you, slowly withering your resolve into nothing over all those years. The only realization I had while holding the 10 tails was that its power was insufficient. Under all that covert emotion, the goddess did, after all, fear something. She had stated that she had arrived here, implying that there were others like her. Was she afraid of them? Were there other, more powerful beings than her? The 10 tails took advantage of that fear. She ignored him once more. Whatever it was, there was no outburst of rage. She appeared to have gathered her resolve as well. She took a step closer, her hand resting on his cheek. He was taken aback by the intense warmth of her hand. Such emotion would not go well with longevity, says the author. Longevity. Why would I want that? How can you ever keep peace? Why do we keep singing the same song and dance? He sighed. It won't last. He had a better understanding of people than she did. It was emotion that made me strong in the first place, he explained. It wasn't just love, it was my anger, fear, and sadness that brought me here in the first place. If I had been anything like you are now, I would have died long ago. She had left once more. It kept him going until she appeared again. It took a while for it to sink in that Kaguya was actually here. How long had she been standing there? She looked him down and said nothing. He couldn't even think of anything to say. All he could do was stare in awe. It's only been a century, can you do another 9? His heart sank. His first thought was, no, he couldn't. These doubts had always plagued him, even when he was young and training. He'd always chosen to ignore it because he wanted to prove it wrong. He fantasized about quitting. He was already familiar with the term, and even thinking about it seemed dangerous. Wabunta. It had never left his mind since she had said it. It dangled in front of him, like his favorite food, and a little taste and he'd be in heaven. Would there be a glimmer of happiness in her eyes if he said it? It was tempting to believe that this was his last sight. He almost burst out laughing at the thought. Yes, she would be happy or not. Other ideas began to emerge, each more enticing than the last. He twitched his lips as if to entice it. Something was off in the distance. He sensed it, something both foreign and familiar, something he hadn't felt in a long time prior to being trapped in here. The return of a long-lost power tingled his gut. Another shockwave ripped through the darkness. Kurama, he said quietly. He sat up, enjoying the sensation of his partner. Kurama was attempting to break through this illusion in order to free him. How much time had passed in the real world? Seconds, minutes. He locked his gaze on Kaguya, his adversary in love. Her relaxed demeanor had been replaced by a wariness, guarded against the surges that would keep him in the illusion. Even with Kurama's might, he knew he wouldn't be able to break through, at least for the time being. She was overly prepared. "I have a question for you, Kaguya," he said. He felt detached. He felt like he could go on forever after another surge of power. "Is this how you created the infinite Tsukiyomi? For one person, you improved it." He didn't need to hear anything from her to figure out the answer. Her expression said it all. "In a morbid way, it's sweet of you to take the time to make a person's dream come true before they die. As fake as it is, I would have liked to have known you before you were changed by the 10 tails." His lips twitched. Kaguya's pupils constricted, and he could see the visible confusion within them. She vanished once more. He lay down, attempting to reacquaint himself with Kurama's chakra. He could feel traces of it in the air. There were no more no surges, but he knew it would only be a matter of time before the next one arrived. Naruto felt a tingling sensation in the tips of his fingers, the excitement that washed over him in waves. He was aware that this was the beginning of the end. Kurama must have only recently realized that he had become entangled in her technique. He wasn't about to give up so easily. 3 surges had echoed through the illusion, but how long would it be before the next attempt? There was no sense of time, as there was no sun or clock. Those had been removed. It was fortunate that he had plenty of time to think about it. Finally, something worthwhile, something forward-thinking. He only had one shot at it. His heartbeat was something Kaguya couldn't stop. He counted his heartbeats minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, and month by month. He now had a general time frame. It took another 50 years for him to feel the next surges of Kurama's chakra bursting through. He needed to have the perfect heartbeat now. He'd gotten better at multitasking since being brought here, with all of his attempts to bring the world to life. Another 50 years, and he'd got it down to the second. But he needed to be sure, so another 50 years had passed. Something had to go wrong along the way, and it was something he had considered. She appeared from the shadows, her long ashen hair flowing behind her and her white eyes fixed on him. His mind began to empty, and his heart began to race. His progress had been halted, and he now had to account for her appearance. He counted his beats, and it raced twice as fast, with an occasional skip. "Has your response changed? Did she make any reference to their first conversation?" "Well, I've got to give it to you. No one can stay the same for hundreds of years," he said. She smiled, a slight tug on her lips. He was taken with the sight. "Who knows, the end will tell," she says. "But I think one thing we have in common is that we're both certain we'll succeed. At least one of us will fail. The other will triumph," he concluded. He tried to concentrate and relax as much as he could. "I'll prove to you that I'll last," he said, questioning his sanity. Was that a hint of admiration in her eyes, or was it his longing to see something like that? "My mother once said something to me about being a Jinchuriki," Naruto continued. "I wish someone had told you that so none of this happened." "That is?" she asked, warily. He almost let it slip from his lips. "Later, maybe at the end," he said. "This could be the end." "Later," he replied, not knowing if he'd ever know, or if she'd ever admit that the 10 tails had influenced her. In the end, it was pure desire on his part to know that she was once human. "There isn't anyone." There he was. "Do you remember when I showed you the history of the shinobi?" Her face was almost expressionless, but there was a twitch of her brow and her eyes flashed with annoyance. "How do you feel about that?" he inquired. "It is an abomination to create something like that." "Well, it still got you, didn't it?" He grinned. "Ridiculous, and I don't need to explain myself to you," she said without looking at him. "It makes little difference, because, after all, I'm going to die, right? What am I going to do with it? So, what's the point of anything? If that's the case, please explain it to me." She didn't, however, and she left. Not that it was time yet, that would be years later, but the final stretch was the longest yet. His heart rate returned to normal, and he accounted for that time. Still, his last and only plan hinged on her willingness to listen to him out. If she didn't come to him within a few minutes, he'd have to wait another time. He had forgotten how much time he had left and how long he had been here, and all that remained was to look forward. But what did that mean for him? He hadn't given it much thought because previously, all that awaited him was death and the futile hope of escaping. Now, the chances were slim, but it was far better. The only thoughts that came to him were that one of them would lose and one would win. Giving in to her would be proving that she was correct. Failure was not an option. He looked down at his hands, which trembled, and his stomach twisted until he couldn't bear it any longer. He grasped his heart, which felt dull and heavy within his chest. Was this how it felt then? He couldn't bear going on without her. It wasn't something he wanted. That was always something he lived by, that he lived only for his friends and never for himself. So he waited until the final beat of his heart. Kaguya, he said, the name coming easily to his lips. You want to know that answer. What did my mother say? He wondered if he had waited a long time, but it was only a few heartbeats. She appeared the same as before, like a ghost in the darkness, but she was the brightest thing in the abyss. I'm not interested in useless information, he says. Then why did she appear? And why did she ask to continue the first time? No one could be alone, it was impossible. I'll tell you anyway, she said, her face expressionless. My mother once said that it was love that kept the tailed beast sealed within us. Our love for our village, our people, and our friends. Is that correct? Her pupils constricted. Perhaps you wouldn't be where you are today if you had focused on what you could have protected the most rather than what you feared. Foolish. What is stupid? That you're so caught up in one thing that another is incomprehensible. Better yet, why look in one direction when you can look in both? He continued because she didn't say anything and her eyes narrowed. I'm the other way, he explained. Can you honestly say that? Was it the fear of what would happen to your bonds that drove you to continually defy me? She inquired. You'd be right, but only for a while, he smiled. I've made a vow to last, to prove to you and whatever other ones you're afraid of that the Tentails and some clone army aren't necessary. Answer, she yelled. So I will, he said. Kaguya, I've made a promise to you. I'm still here to prove that love triumphs and gives you the strength to carry on, and I can do this indefinitely. Love did it, and I've been defiant all along. I can do that because I love you. Without you, I would have given up a long time ago. Her eyes widened in shock, clear-written surprise. If he had to choose a moment to relive forever, it might be this one. Then it came. Kurama's chakra exploded forward, a massive wave that Naruto had to sink with the initial impact. Naruto clasped his hands and poured everything he had into it, everything he had and more, to break this illusion, to return to the real world, to live and breathe and see light, to see her in the flesh and prove her wrong, and his way was right and far better. She realized her mistake, the momentary lapse in concentration. But it was too late. All he could think about was her reaction, what she might have been before the Ten Tails corruption. He would have loved to have known that person, and if there was any chance of that happening, then this had to end. The world cracked and shattered like glass, and he burst through it. He gasped as alien and cold air filled his lungs. Her grip around his neck was warm and tight. She flinched in the real world. Her grip loosened around his neck. He struck at her arm, and her fingers came loose. Yet, he already felt the danger of her all-killing ash bone. He jumped back a safe distance and kept a close eye on her chakra, which had a noticeable dip, as endless as it seemed at first. How much chakra did that use? Nothing else mattered, there was only her. It was only a fleeting thought. At the forefront of his mind were other things about her and about now. Was this going too well? Was this all a fantasy? The air was different, not like the one he created with the technique, but like the one she created for him. Are you all right, Naruto? A voice asked, and he didn't even recognize the voice, and the name was barely on his lips. The fox stared within his soul, confined within the seal. Kurama, another voice he couldn't control, asked, is this real? Of course not. How long did you stay? Your chakra is different, I can tell, Kurama said. He grinned, reassuring Kurama, though it was an expected response. Of course there would be reassurance that everything was real. Yeah, and I've been there for a long time, he said. Can you continue? Does anyone have a choice? In any case, I don't plan on losing, if that's what you're concerned about, he said. Outside, some distance away from Kaguya, Naruto fell to his knee, but he couldn't relax too much. Getting out of that technique had taken a lot out of him, just as it had taken something out of Kaguya. Naruto sensed several others approaching from behind. He knew they weren't enemies, and he just remembered there were others here. He couldn't put their voices to their faces, and he couldn't even put their faces to their voices. I noticed your chakra was disrupted, but it appears you're fine. Can you continue? There isn't time to talk, Sasuke said. We must concentrate on the enemy, on my lead. Naruto used Kurama's chakra to prepare himself, then rose and looked at Kaguya, who had also prepared herself. Let's go, said Sasuke. He didn't know how long it lasted. It felt so short, each attack deflected or nullified. It felt so short, he was used to years of idleness. Everything felt so insignificant, and he couldn't help but feel that way because it came natural like breathing. His perception of time was skewed, and he still didn't quite believe he was in the real world. He came up with a solution, and there were so few. Naruto wouldn't fail, fake or otherwise, and it wasn't until the end that he realized which reality he was in. Her hand pointed at him, a flash of bone, and he resisted moving. He felt it pierce him, like a needle with a small sharp sting. His senses screamed, but he calmed them down. Kaguya had no idea what it was like to be hit by her all-killing ash bone. Well, it was real all along, he muttered, laughing. This wasn't paradise, and it shouldn't have come to this. Kaguya's face contorted in shock, and she trembled from the effects of the ceiling. He wished he knew her thoughts, so he wouldn't have to rely on his assumptions. He felt the tears fall, and they tickled his cheeks as they trickled down. He could do one more thing. Well, I win, he said. You fool, Kaguya said, moving her mouth, but he couldn't hear her. He can now sleep. Something drew him here, but something else drew him away. A sense of warmth and a shade of cold. To move forward, or to remain forever. Perhaps he would have hated that fact what felt like lifetimes and lifetimes ago, that he was gone forever from the living and left here. But his time never stopped. There was change. He died, and he was okay with it. Naruto stood and waited, not knowing why. It was the same as when he was in the gaping abyss. There was nothing here. He was used to it. Of course, he remembered what he had done just before he died, so there was something else that drew him here like a moth to flame. Kaguya. She sat, her dress and hair spilling over the ground that didn't exist. An empty space. A fool with a stupid promise, she grumbled. The fool who was correct, he responded. Does that even make sense? The person who killed him was the person he loved. Was love chosen, or was it as natural as breathing? So, you lost. Does that make sense? I am immortal, after all, she replied. It's so simple that even a fool can understand it. Will you try again despite your failure? Fail until you succeed, and that didn't happen this time. Why did you come here? She asked, shaking her head. How can I not? This is not the right place for you. This doesn't seem like a place for you either, he said as he looked around the never-ending blackness. She didn't look at him, but she was enraged. Leave, go, she said. Naruto looked around some more. The call had once seemed inviting, but it no longer did. There, beyond this place between life and death, lay his mother and all those who had died. You are dead, but I am not, Kaguya said, and I will never die, so I can never leave. What a terrible curse it is to never leave, to remain here for all eternity. If you're sealed forever, you're effectively dead. I don't think I'm going anywhere, she says. Their only company was the darkness and each other, but he was used to it. He sat, crossed his legs, and relaxed, the weight falling off his shoulders. Did he choose to die, or was it something he had to do to keep her at bay? You'll leave, she said, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Are you in here? There is no today or tomorrow, he replied, recalling all those days in the dark. So, I'll be here forever, he concluded. She looked at him but said nothing, despite the fact that he knew there was a question. I like to believe that true love endures forever, he explained. You would be wrong, she said weakly. Or perhaps that was his wish, and he imagined it. Man, he messed up during his time in her technique. I promise I'll never leave, he said. Didn't I prove you wrong? No, you didn't. Defeating those from my clan is no longer possible. I guess I should update my promise. I wouldn't stay anywhere without you for long, he replied, his gaze darting away. Perhaps you're right, that the beast withered me away, she admitted, but I still don't like all those humans. Well, you have time to make it up, should we ever get out of here, he said, his lips trembling and his voice coarse. He was crying a lot. These emotions felt powerful, far better than the hatred and frustration, and feeling hopeless and alone. I have no desire to do so, she says. Not them, he declared, but make it up to me for all these lonely centuries. He no longer desired to be alone. You're reminding me of what love must have felt like once, Kaguya said, almost pityingly. She said nothing else, but she closed her eyes and didn't move, making him happy for the first time.
So this was it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.